Yvonne takes on the big elephant in the Kenyan room. The memo smokes out the stigma going viral in the north. And on the angle tonight, we go searching for the button to reset in Kenya.
Niwahakikishie kuwa mimi na wenzangu nchini Tanzania tutafanya kila linalowezekana ili uhusiano wetu uzidi kung'aa, na kwa kufanya hivyo tung'arishe ushirikiano wa Afrika Mashariki. Tanzania itaendelea kuwa jirani mbia na rafiki mwaminifu wa Kenya na mwanachama mwadilifu na wa kutumainiwa ndani ya Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki. Jitihada zangu na wenzangu katika serikali ninayoiongoza zitaelekezwa katika kuimarisha ushirikiano wetu ndani ya jumuiya yetu. Tutaelekeza jitihada zetu katika kutafuta majawabu palipo na changamoto, kufufua fursa palipo na vikwazo na kuleta matumaini palipo na mashaka. Tutafanya hivyo kwa kuamini kwa dhati kabisa kuwa wana Afrika Mashariki hatima yetu imefungamana. Nasi hatuna budi tufungamane.
All right, sights and sounds there from that colorful visit by Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu. All those stories about Mafundo and the related words. We'll be coming back to that in a short while. But right now, as we speak, there is something going on in Parliament. The third reading right now we are in of that debate on the BBI bill, as we have called it. And I think we can listen a little bit to what's happening right there in the National Assembly. All right, so going through some of the procedures there, and we'll be keeping you updated as they do that, because the MPs just passed the bill. You know, the second reading is that critical bill stage of the bill where they debate and actually pass it, and they passed it by an interesting threshold. Francis, bring us up to speed. The vote just happened not too long ago, and there is a threshold that they haven't quite reached since we started observing this parliament.
Absolutely, and what is happening now, Joe, is the third reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020. The lawmaking process: first reading, no debate; second reading, debate and voting; then committee stage, third reading. Because this is a constitutional amendment bill, the requirement was that at least half of the members in the National Assembly were required to vote in favor or against for the bill to sail through the next stage. That was 175 members out of 349. So in the first round, 235 voted in favor, 84 voted against, 2 abstained. That is a huge number because two-thirds majority has not been achieved previously. You remember the gender parity bills, the 6 or 7 attempts. The closest they came was 200 and something, less than 233. So by raising 233 shows you the amount of lobbying that went into it. That was a critical stage, and now the bill has moved to the third stage. They require a similar number, 175 plus, for the National Assembly to be deemed to have approved or to have voted in favor of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020. And by the look of things, looks like they'll get the numbers because the members are still in the House. And you can even see the number of MPs in the National Assembly is higher than has been the case during this period of COVID season.
Yeah.
Actually, the National Assembly, according to the protocols, was only allowed to have 112 members at any given time in the chambers. I mean, looking at it even now, you can tell you there are more than 112.
Actually, at some point, the speaker was complaining because they're all crowding in some corners, and the speaker was quite alarmed because of the COVID concerns.
And even now, Joe, what has happened, because the speaker has ruled that they will not do the physical individual voting that they were doing, where you're called, you come to the microphone, you say whether you vote yes or you vote no. So what he has done, he has asked those who are in favor to stand on the right, those who are against the bill to stand on the left, so that the tallying clerks can, using the list, can have the members come file, in one file, state their names, laini moja, mlolongo, actually call it mlolongo, to do a mlolongo sort of, so that their names can be entered. Because at the end of the day, this is a house of records. The numbers for either in favor of the bill or against the bill must be entered, so that when you're transmitting the bill now to the president, it must be accompanied by a proper house record. How many voted in favor, how many voted against? Because if they jump any of the steps, it can be a basis for challenging the process in a court of law. Yet
Linus, one would say that all these efforts, everybody being so pedantic about the numbers, is perhaps for the record purposes that Francis is talking about, but also maybe in terms of the symbolism of it, the political messaging around it, because this is a process that is so important for the president, certainly also for the ODM leader Raila Odinga, and it would be quite a blow, as it were, politically at least, if this fails to meet that threshold, which is really only academic in this case, because 257 basically says it doesn't matter whichever way the House votes, it still goes to the people, isn't it?
That's right, Joe. And first of all, I really hope we are not watching a super spreader event. Some of the positioning was quite uncomfortable in terms of just how the members of parliament are crowding there. But in terms of how the evening is playing out, politics is taking the beaten path. BBI is following the path of its promoters. And what has happened is the president and the former prime minister's political allies are doing their business, and they are doing it well, very, very ruthlessly. 235 in the second reading. And this is the first time, like you say, that over 233, that's 2/3, have ever been achieved. And when you look at the voting patterns, they are taking the patterns of the existing political divisions. You would see where Kieleweke, ODM, how they are voting.
Actually call it handshake.
Or handshake side, yes. And then there is the Tanga side, the DP allies or UDA voting no. But again, surprises are coming through this night. When you see a member of parliament for Bahati, Kimani Ngunjiri, an ardent supporter of the DP voting yes, then it says something. But so does it speak when you see Otiende Amolo, who has been under a lot of political pressure, voting yes. He has been critical of this process. And maybe if we could just listen very quickly to what Otiende Amolo had to say.
This morning.
It was actually this morning, yes.
He was actually speaking on Daybreak this morning.
Yes,
and he has been under quite some pressure, as you said.
A lot of pressure, and same case with James Orengo. What has happened in the latest stages of this BBI debate? BBI has basically brought about an implosion within ODM. There are cracks, serious cracks within ODM. And when you look at Orengo and Otiende Amolo, you can't be closer than Raila Odinga than these two. These were the stars of the petition in 2017. They were the stars of the petition, and they delivered. Very brilliant lawyers and very strong personalities when it comes to their political backgrounds. But we also do know...
We have the soundbite, I think.
Yes, but we also do know that in this country, follow the line, follow what the instructions are, or pay the price. And Orengo knows this. He has paid the price before, and this is not the first time. Let's listen to actually both Otiende Amolo and James Orengo in that succession.
There are also people who are now focused only on the BBI and the handshake and benefits they get in these circumstances of cooperation, and have lost sight of our goal in terms of Raila becoming president. And some of them have therefore become merchants. And that is the truth.
Have your own self-worth. And me, I can never be intimidated in my political life. Can never be intimidated. Because I've seen many people come and go. I've seen many powerful people come and go. I've seen presidents come here and go. I have seen people who, on their word, you would leave this house and you'll be locked in the same day. They have come and gone. I have seen very respected women in this country like Grace Onyango, who was in the committee for the special investigations relating to the disappearance of JM. Yeah.
Look, this is not James Orengo of a few weeks ago, but this is vintage James Orengo going back to the dispatch box and basically warning the House that, you know, things can be bad. But if you listen to Otiende Amolo, Otiende Amolo let the cat out of the bag today. Because this is the biggest denial, especially among the two principals or the two promoters of the BBI process. The two principals of the handshake, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. They always say, no, it's not about 2022. Here is what, here we have Otiende Amolo saying, we are forgetting what we were to get in return, which is Raila Odinga becoming president. So in that, the cat is out of the bag.
In fact, Joe, when we listen to that soundbite, I think when we listen to it a bit more, he says now there are two sides of the handshake, the president's side and the former prime minister's side. And he says, we know where they stand on that side, but on our side, there are our own people who seem to who have gotten too comfortable with the way things are right now by being on the right side of government, that they're okay with how things are and they've forgotten why we got into this in the first place. And as Linus has said, he's let the cat out of the bag. You know, we kept saying that the BBI is not really clear about what it's all about. And both sides are looking at it differently from what they'll gain out of it. The side that supports the Honorable, the former Prime Minister, knows this is exactly what they want, him to be in the ballot in the next general elections and probably win it. But then what do the other side, the ones who are in it from the President's side, what do they see the BBI as? I don't think it's really been clear about what it is. That's one. And two, so after what happens in Parliament, then what next? Gashuri will probably tell us about what next. Does this affect in any way the calendar of the referendum as we had anticipated? We had thought maybe it would go longer because, yes, we have one draft, we have another one. That seems to have been sorted out. I think which draft is being organized, is going to be discussed. I don't know if someone will go to court next week and say, wait, what was passed by the Parliament is not the draft that is supposed to have come from the county, is not the draft that is supposed to have been the correct one. And I think also what we expect to see in the Senate maybe next week when they do sit to discuss this is probably almost the same thing. They'll vote according to which side of the divide they fall on, and chances are this document will pass. And maybe you expect to see the referendum maybe in July or August. And of course, we have the court cases coming up. And I was having a discussion with Gashuri a short while back, and I said, so what about the court cases? And he said, well, it'll be interesting to watch and see what happens to the court cases in the next week or so, because as things stand, nothing is going to stop this referendum from happening at some point this year. So they may complain about, the numbers of constituencies, vacancies, or the Judiciary Ombudsman Office will affect the independence of the judiciary, and any other issues that were brought up today by those for or against this document. But chances are, people, let's expect to have a referendum come August or July.
I think you've let the cat out of the bag in that statement.
No, Yvonne, I wanted to hold you for a bit
Yeah.
because you come in on that. But I think there's a point that I wanted to follow up on regarding the ODM question. I mean, how I see it, and you know, just from listening to all these people and talking to some of them, I think there are a number of dynamics that are at play within ODM at the moment. One, there is the question of the handshake. What's the end game of the handshake? Because that's a question that many people have been asking. And I think there is something Otiende Amolo is saying there, and in people who sort of believe what he believes say that it's not just that they want this the handshake to lead to the presidency of Raila Odinga, but there's also the idea that ODM still is a party in its own right, and therefore whatever happens here, they still have that eternal objective of any party to get to power. So they're saying, well, you know what, we are in this thing, but we are really not in government, so we can't afford to behave and sit and look like we are actually in government. What is that thing that is going on in the party towards preparing for next year's general election and actually vying for the presidency? And at the moment, according to him, that person who should vie for the presidency in that arrangement is Raila Odinga, and that is whether the handshake holds or not. But I think there's another dynamic which is even more interesting. I think there are people who there's local politics at play, but there's also national politics at play, and some people are beginning to think about what the French call the après Raila, like what happens after him, like after he many people say, well, this could be his last stab at the presidency, and what happens then to that bloc after he leaves? And there are a number of people who probably might be looking at that, and some people have talked about James Orengo, for example. Would he, I mean, even though they are kind of within the same age bracket, but then would he be that person who then holds that bloc for some time before passing it on to God knows who? So that is also a dynamic that is being discussed in those circles. And then there's a whole question of local politics. Some people say James Orengo would like to run for governorship in Siaya. What does that got to do with it? I mean, it could be that there is a whole thing there about how he then positions himself over there about that. There is also the possibility that certain people who also have interest in that particular race might also stoke the fire. So it's actually a really interesting dynamic that we'll have to watch and see how it plays out. But certainly not a very good week for ODM, Yvonne. But you were bringing something about referendum, and I wanted to just check, because you track all these court cases for us. And what happens tonight, notwithstanding, there are still quite a number of legal hurdles in the way of this BBI thing. So it's not like it will just leave Parliament and go straight to the President, and then Chebukati and his team will get to work.
Certainly not. There's those 7 petitions that were now collapsed into one that we're currently awaiting a final judgment on. And just to take everybody back, it's important for people to understand that at the very start of that case, or those cases, IEBC was barred from doing anything to preparing towards a possible referendum, because I think by that time it was fairly certain that we were headed that way once the 24 county assemblies threshold had been met. And now that we know it touches on the protected clauses in 255, whatever happens in Parliament, in the National Assembly and at the Senate, what's the word we use, is of no consequence, or doesn't make a difference, or is academic, is an academic exercise. But then IEBC currently, as we speak, doing nothing towards the preparation of this. Now the judgment for that is estimated to be anywhere around June, but it is what the judges call on notice. So that means they will be the ones to tell us when they are ready with their judgment. And we're also hearing...
that can be as soon as next week.
And that can be as soon as next week. Yeah, y'all are letting the cat out of the bag with how that goes. So it could be any time from next week or up until June. So certainly even the June timeline that the proponents of the BBI had, sort of put in place to have a referendum by that time, certainly not going to be possible. Let's imagine one way that the court decides to, throw out those petitions. Then IEBC has 90 days from the moment the president then transmits this bill to them. They will have to do quite a bit of work because some of the preliminary work that they would have already started doing, they have not been, doing because, they don't want to be in contravention of a court order. And then we're also hearing there could possibly be...
What if they have been doing it silently?
Well, that would be against a court order. But then this is Kenya. Many arms of government have been known to do it against.
To go and check what the IBC is doing right now, that they're not preparing and everything.
Because
the other
processes
day,
are there, we
had the JSC one that was quite interesting because they were literally stopped from, considering all those. And the moment they got the ruling
they had the JSC was a little different, though. They had stated, I think, at the beginning, and we'll get into that a little later, that they would actually be scoring and tallying the candidates every day, that they would finish that by the end of the day. This is, I'm not holding brief for them, but anyway, that was the case there. But what I was going to say...
Remind me to tell you something when we discuss that also.
And for me, I just found it curious.
That time.
Why are you going to tell me afterwards?
I just found it curious, that, the court rules and then somehow they were able to consider this very quickly. And, no sooner had. So even the IBC, who knows what's happening?
Had the IBC been prepared. But the other thing I wanted to raise about the court cases is, we're sort of starting to hear murmurs, particularly with that whole, back and forth over, did we have the right bill? Which one was it? And there are possibly some people thinking, and I think even Irungu Kangata raised it on the floor of the House, was it last week, that there might be some people who would now question whether, the procedural of it, was the 24 county threshold met exactly. Because it was 17 counties that debated the bill that is now before the National Assembly that they're passing, and 33 that sort of debated the wrong bill, if you like. So, let's wait and see. In any case, even if the court decides one way, there's the Court of Appeal, there's the Supreme Court, so let's see how far that goes. So, definitely, court cases standing in the way of that. The other thing I just wanted to add on what we've talked about with ODM is, the 2022 succession, like you said, for both the presidency and the local. And a lot of what is happening now, if many of us remember, actually started before. You remember when there was talk about money that was meant, to go out for campaigns, and I think Karanja Kibicho's name was mentioned in the mix about who's supposed to release the monies for that. Remember, there was the people who felt some discomfort with Gideon Moi, who had been going around the country, people saying, okay, so where is he getting those resources? Is he the favored one in terms of this? And then there's the One Kenya Alliance that has been thrown into the mix. There's 70 new constituencies that have been proposed in the BBI bill. What is the distribution of that? Could there be some people in the ODM camp who are unhappy with the distribution of, those constituencies? That would then help with the local politics that Joe had mentioned, that, you would feel like in your constituency, that battle won't be so much because you've got 3 more constituencies and your main opponent can then move to the next constituency and things like that.
Less competition for yourself and more chances of getting that seat.
Yeah, so the cracks in ODM are really a symptom of 2022. And now just tell us that maybe there was a deal with this handshake, that the ODM side was to deliver on the BBI and Uhuru Kenyatta's side was to deliver on the presidency. I think that question that we had been talking about is slowly...
I thought Otiende Amolo actually answered that.
He did.
So madeni anaongezeka. Francis, you need to have the last word on this because we need to actually go to that visit.
Yeah. Looking at those pictures that are on happening now at the National Assembly, you see, it was not possible to distinguish or to differentiate or to separate the constitution amendment process and the 2022 succession politics. Those two things go side by side. In any case, whether you're pro or anti-BBI, the truth of the matter is, do I call them both camps in the political setup currently, are planning for next year with the two scenarios in mind. I mean, both scenarios are on the table. Speak to a few guys who support Tanga and they tell you they are planning with plan A and plan B. If the constitution is amended, this is the plan. If the constitution is not amended and status quo remains as we head to 2022, planning with the same. Even on the other end, in the event BBI passes and the amendments are sailed through and the positions are created, the extra constituencies are created, this is the plan. Or this is the lineup. If it does not happen, this is also another lineup. So both ends are planning with all this in mind for 2022 because these are close connection between the two processes, but also looking at
inextricably intertwined.
Intertwined, but also looking at the numbers, what is happening on the floor of the House now. It was also a display of the game of numbers in Parliament. I mean, politics is a game of numbers. We keep hearing this every so often, and these numbers are at the ballot and also in Parliament. Achieving 235 by whichever means, whether by lobbying or whichever means.
Or the statement that came from both the principles of the handshake.
Whichever means.
You seem to be hiding a lot in whichever.
I'm not hiding anything. I'm saying
it's the equivalent of ile kujaza Uhuru Park, so that
precisely. Lobbying 235 members to vote in one way or another is also a political statement. You know, Parliament has a key role to play in the process of amending the constitution and other processes thereafter. So moving 235 members is no mean task and tells you a few things that could happen, you know, using Parliament. But at the same time, it would have been bad optics for the movers of the BBI process for either of the two houses to reject the process. And these are the same members that you're relying on to go and sell the document out there. So you can imagine if the National Assembly rejected the bill or the Senate, and you're expecting the very same senators to help you to campaign for the document to the people who elected them. It would have been not very interesting optics for the president and the ODM leader. And so, and that also explains why it is 10:40 and members of the National Assembly are still in session. When is the last time you saw
in their numbers?
And not just in session,
the ones who are in Zoom meetings
huge
around
numbers. In about another, let's say 10 minutes or so, they will be telling us the numbers. When is the last time you saw 200 plus members in the National Assembly? Even when some very critical matters are being discussed, 10:40, 10:50 in the House, even during the day. Rhea, tells you something.
Take us to that break.
And because we also have the numbers here, 5. Let's take a break.